allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, roll call. Mike? Here. Jim?
Here.
Heidi?
Here.
Ron?
Here.
Ed? Nope. All right, so we don't have the minutes yet from the October 9th meeting, so we'll skip that. Next up is discussion, and final recommendations for the county town design at the foot of Matanzas Bridge. I see we had a handout here. Chelsea, what does this reflect, this one you put in our packets today?
The one titled Public Safety Committee Recommendation on Crosswalk Design at the foot of Matanzas Pass Bridge. It's a two-page document. It is the compiled comments from your last meeting, as well as any additional feedback that you all emailed me individually that was put on here. Nothing big that changed any comments or anything, just kind of individual plantings, shrubbery, those types of things.
Okay, and the map?
The map
Is
was my
representation?
attempt at being an artist, which I am not. I believe Heidi and Tom presented these concepts to council at their last meeting, and this map comes from this. And there has been comments made at the council meeting that have not been reflected to this.
Do we know what those comments are?
Do you want to?
Heidi, you got any idea what else they said, or Chelsea, do you have any idea?
I can tell you that I know a representative from TPI did come to the meeting and address the one-way concern of Fifth. One of the bigger comments that was entertained, you all received many compliments on this and your thoughts and your ideas. One of the thoughts to entertain was don't have the right turn from Estero onto Fifth, but keep Fifth two-way. That way people can come and go to TPI's resort.
Okay. So since we had, for those on the committee, we had our meeting, we came up with these recommendations, and we had talked about bringing it back and discussing it again. Chelsea sent me a note about 2 days after our meeting saying that the town manager wanted these to be presented to the council that following Monday. So we took the notes, summarized them, and that's what was presented. So what you see here is what was written, and Tom and Heidi stopped in at their M&P so that if they had any questions that they could answer them. I did, because we hadn't had time for public input on this, I did reach out to TPI, John Gucciardo, and asked him if he had any issues with them. He did contact me over that weekend, and did say that the one-way was an issue because they had no way to get people out of their resort and back down to the south end of the island, which makes perfect sense, and I'm pretty sure if we would have heard that and thought that, we would have done that. The only other option is, people had indicated that, well, then give them an exit on the Crescent, which would just turn into an absolute traffic nightmare. So I did send a note to Anita, said we understood that, gave her the time frame that we didn't have a chance to review it, but we'd bring it up at this meeting. And I did, if I understand the next steps on this correctly, they made a list of recommendations at the meeting that Anita recorded. They had these, they prioritized a list that they had. And Anita, when she gets back in town, is going to set up a meeting with the town manager, county representatives, Commissioner Sendelli, and myself to meet with them and go through our recommendations, present our recommendations. The council's presenting, so Anita will be there, but I'll be there to only to represent the comments that we made at the meeting here. So with this, to kind of put a wrapper on it, if there are any additional, well, first off, the thoughts on the one-way, making it two-way, with the other option being it may be two ways, but there is no right off of Estero onto Crescent. Anita was opposed to that, by the way. She says we need a way for people that are exiting the island to get back on. That was her, so I just want to throw that out. That was just part of the discussion. So I'll start with you, Mike. Is there any additions to this list or any comments on the one-way versus two-way and right on off Estero onto Crescent?
I'm thinking I like the two-way still. I'm sort of with the mayor, Saracita, saying that we should have a right turn there. I know but you know, people make mistakes. They get confused down in that area. And, you know, that gives them an out to stay back on the island instead of going over the bridge and coming back across, you know, when the traffic's the traffic. So I'm just saying, I think it should stay two-way, but I think we should have a right turn there.
Okay.
So.
Jim?
I agree with Mike. I think you have to, even if you sign it so that it's like reentry to the island, I mean, so that people don't see that as a normal thing you would do, but if you had to suddenly, oh my gosh, I don't mean to go over the bridge, rather than have them stop in the middle of the road and say, now what do I do? Which is normal. Yeah.
But you're thinking similar to the signage off of the causeway coming off of Sanibel they have, if you don't want to leave, turn
Right.
here, okay? Anything else on the recommendations or things we want to take back to council?
I have a question. The trolley stop at Crescent, how is that going to be? Is that going to be like the other trolley stops down the boulevard where the trolley just pulls over?
Sorry. The trolley, from what I've seen, and from what the county had proposed, is a chicane where they pull off onto county property and then let traffic pass.
So is it going to be like all the ones on Estero?
This one, I think, from what I've seen, would be closer to Newton Park comparison.
On
where-
Crescent?
Yeah. Because they don't, right now, there's not the right of way to do that. And from one of the plans that the county put through was, they would actually take some of Crescent Beach Park to have that trolley pull off. It's very narrow right there.
Okay, because if it's like all the other ones where the trolley just kind of pulls to the side of the road, I think we're going to have a traffic issue. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I just want to make sure I'm understanding the same spot. You're talking right off of Estero onto Crescent Street?
No, I'm
Or you're
talking
talking
this
about
one.
this? Okay,
I'm talking the one at Crescent Park.
okay.
Because if it's like all the other ones where they just pull over and they have that little line mark area. Sometimes I've seen it when the tram was running, you had the tram and the trolley both at the same stop and no traffic could get through. So that could be an issue for blocking traffic.
So
I'm
you're
thinking.
advocating a pull-off so that there
Yeah, they
is,
definitely have to get
the two
off.
lanes remain and there's a pull-off to get around, as was described, that I think Newton Park has that.
Right.
Why are we removing the one there at Times Square? I mean, that's a heavily used trolley stop, and it's comfortable. You know what I mean? When you're down in Times Square, you know, there's a lot of people milling in that area around there. So I got a feeling we're going to get a lot of complaints about removing that.
I have the impression that the reason why we're removing it there is because we're anticipating with the resort going in, people coming on to, this is the southbound trolley. Is that, I've got that right?
Yes.
So that people would park here, they could either walk over to Crescent, cross over to the resort, or walk backwards to Times Square. In other words, you're putting it between the two places of most attraction, Times Square and the resort area of there at downtown. What's missing on this map is the northbound trolley, and I'm presuming it's going to stop south of Crescent so that it can turn. Or if it's the one that's leaving the island, it can just go on around without stopping at all around the curve.
Right, and that's what actually I thought Heidi was going, is because one of the discussions was looking at the tram and trolley map, would be that the tram trolley would proceed right onto Crescent and coming back up Old San Carlos if they remove the one that's in Seafarers. And if they do that, then we need to have some kind of place where that tram people could get off.
Are there not two different routes, though? One route goes to the parking area down off near Summerlin to the transportation area, and the other route would go through downtown and up to the north end and to the Bowditch Park, and then it would come back. And both of those would end up stopping, as the one that comes over the bridge would end up stopping here, and the one coming back from Bowditch Park would also end up stopping here.
Yes.
So if you have a place just as nice as this, and maybe there's no land there because they don't have any right-of-way, but if you had a place just as nice as this that was just south of Crescent, it would allow people to disembark, walk up to the intersection, and if they want to cross over there to the beach side, they could, and walk up to Times Square. Or if they continue riding, they go down Crescent under the bridge and into the Old San Carlos downtown area. And if they wanted to ride it all the way out to the park, they could. Or if it's the route that's going to the transportation center, they could just stay on it. And once it leaves this stop south of Crescent, it's not stopping again until it gets over the other side of the bridge.
I just want to make, I would like to see that one stay there at Times Square. I think it's heavily used, it's comfortable, it's easy to use, everybody's right there. So to leave that one in existing, I don't know, maybe you could leave and even add one right here and have two there, because I think with this new, Margaritaville going in, you might need two. So I don't know.
I know, go ahead, Heidi.
We could, if you leave that one in Times Square and you add the one at Crescent, one could be the tram stop, one could be the trolley stop also.
Figured out. I know that and I'll put that down, I'll bring that up with Anita at that meeting, but the other thought was there was much discussion about where the Times Square one, since it's a half block down, where we're talking about relocating to a single nice stop, is replacing where the Times Square one comes out, putting parking for bicycles and other things like that in there to encourage the bicycle traffic in that. So I'll raise that issue with them.
The other thing was they wanted to find out what is going at Seafarers.
Right.
Because if the county plans on putting like little shops or something there, then they still want sidewalk there along with a trolley stop on that side. But if they're not going to do that, that was like the biggest thing.
That's number one, is they want to get an answer
Find
on
out what,
Seafarers.
thanks. Find out what they're doing with the Seafarers.
Well, doesn't Lee Tran and the county have the final decision on where these stops go?
Yes. It's their boulevard, and at the end of the day, we're making recommendations, and it's a question of how strongly the town wants to take a position, or if the town wants to, in fact, pay for some of this. So Chelsea will tell you, in the budget, she put in money to pay for these shelters. If the county doesn't, to put in the type of shelters that we talked to the council about last year. So that's the other alternative, if the town wants to do that. What else you got, Heidi?
I think that was it.
Ron?
As far as the street, if it's going to, Fifth Street, if it's going to be two-way, then I think we do need the right-hand turn. But I'm still in favor of it being one-way. But there again, I'm not a traffic engineer, and I see the point that DPI is making, but I don't know that Crescent Street couldn't be used, because wasn't there the county, they were speaking of possibly putting a traffic signal there.
So I'm going to jump on that real quick. Part of the design for the bridge and that review and analysis called for traffic signalization at Crescent and Estero, and another one at Old San Carlos Boulevard and Estero. The county it's LAP funded, federal funding. The town actually was just approved as a project-to-project basis for LAP funding. So the town will be overseeing the one out Old San Carlos and Estero, and the county will be overseeing the one on Crescent and Estero. If you see out there right now, there's a big old wheel in front of Crescent Beach Park. The county's installing the conduit for the lighting, for the signalization. So Funding for both of those projects will be released July 1st of 2020. And that means we're in design and design process right now with FDOT.
All right, so here's kind of the summary I've got to take back to the meeting with the county. Jim, Mike, and Ron, assuming it stays a two-way Crescent, I didn't get your view on it, but Heidi, but Jim, Mike, and Ron, if it does remain two-way, turning right off of Estero makes sense. Heidi, and then the other was possible signage that says this is return to island, so that that's what people use it for. Heidi, trolley stop on Crescent needs to be a pull-off into Crescent Beach Park, so it does not tie up traffic anymore. Mike, leaving the trolley stop at Times Square, what's the public's perception of removing that? In that case, we would have one at Times Square and another one down at Crescent Beach. My concern is on Crescent, if the trolley and the tram go down, if the tram primarily goes down that way, we need to find some space for them to pull off without backing up at the corner. And Ron's still in favor of the one-way. What did I miss? Okay. With that, we'll put the foot of the bridge to rest. I'll take these, I'll write them back up, I'll get them to the mayor before the meeting that she gets scheduled with the county. Chelsea, did you have anything else on that one?
Just that, so jumping back to the signalization really quick, that we have to have 60, 90, 100% design review. It has to go through the lengthy FDOT process, and we have to do that before June 30th. We are in discussions with a contractor or an engineering team to do the design of that, and that should be forthcoming to town council at their next regularly scheduled meeting. So I do have one other thing which kind of affects that. We do need to speak about micro-mobility, which is like this, I think we briefly touched on it last time, about the like scooter, where kind of like an Uber, but a scooter, where you swipe your card and you can rent the scooter and then you can leave it and drop it either at a designated spot. That is something that was sent back here to this committee by council, I don't even know how long ago. I know we touched on it before, but I don't think we had any conclusive evidence on how the committee felt.
I thought that came up, and we said we can't picture 80-year-olds on scooters going up and down the beach, and the council kind of pulled back on that, as Joanne Champ specifically. But if that's...
I just need some formalization from this committee.
Well, there was a handout or some brochure where, so why don't you just bring that, they don't need that answer today, so why don't you just bring that back and we'll make it a formal recommendation. Okay. But as I recall, that did come up for those that weren't on the committee at the time. This is a firm that wants to give scooters, and in some cases electric scooters, for people to go up and down the island on. And you could, like they do in some cities, that a lot of them are banning now because they are hazardous, that you would pick it up somewhere, swipe your card, drop it off wherever you feel like, and then someone would pick them up and put them back. But there was a lot of discussion about the population on the island and some of the ability for some of the people to actually be able to balance and move those things up and down the island in conjunction with the electric bikes that are out there and the bicycles and pedestrians and traffic. It was kind of, I thought it was just, they just said, no, we're not doing it. But
we have a weekly meeting, department director meeting, and we go over the agenda management, and it's kind of been one of those at the bottom in limbo for a while, and it just I can put it in a monthly report to town council, or you can provide it to them during the updates.
I think just to bring back the brochure, and we'll make it a formal thing, we'll review it, so send it out for the next meeting, we'll review it, people make their comments, and we'll come up with a formal recommendation out of the committee.
Sounds good. That doesn't sound good.
If it's okay, I have one other question. In reading some of the things in the paper about this process, the road around the bridge, there were a number of references to the possibility of putting a pedestrian walkover in the middle of all of this stuff that we had not discussed and had not been on any of our proposed plans. And I was wondering if, in fact, that's real, or was that just a journalist's interpretation?
I don't believe it ended up on the recommendations after the council spoke. They did ask about the roundabout and what happened to that, and that was one of the questions they were going to ask. But the crossover, I don't remember that getting added to the recommendations. Do you, Heidi? I know it was mentioned, but I don't remember.
The only pedestrian crossover is associated with the TPI project. No, nothing in this.
Nothing down at the foot of the bridge,
Correct.
as I would say. Okay.
And I know that in the past that's come up, and some council members have been very vocal about being opposed to any crossovers. They were very much opposed initially with TPIs as well. But I don't think that it ended up on their recommendation list.
I don't think so either.
Okay.
All right, so you're going to bring the micromobility to the next meeting,
Yes.
and we will formally discuss it. Next up, all right, so for those that were at or saw a council meeting last night or listened to the news, the lighting study, again, was brought up to the council yesterday before our meeting today. And so
Well, let me touch on that real quick, because council, it was scheduled for the M&P tomorrow. Council canceled the M&P. And so the only opportunity would have been for yesterday or for November 18th, I think.
Okay.
But I had to coordinate with David Green to make sure that he could meet either of those dates.
Okay, and so when they talked about it, the same gentleman that made the presentation, us, made a presentation there. Before that, public comment, there was a lot of public comment about amber lighting. And at the end of the meeting, or at the end of that particular part of the discussion, the council brought this up, 4-1, I believe it was, 3-1. 3-1, with Bruce asking to move forward on the plan that's proposed. They had tasked the town manager with going back and finding a consultant that could come in and look at it from an amber lighting perspective. And so at first it was, well, if that's what they're doing, then we have nothing to do for a while. But then thinking about it, and you guys tell me if you want to do it this way, I really think that after watching the council meeting, I thought there were times when the consultant actually had some valid points that they kind of talked over. They didn't ask, for example, he talked about 22 lights, or I think it was, that they had gone to 22 sites, hatchling sites, where they could actually see lighting. And so to me, the natural question would have been, are those the old style light that is being replaced? Or were those the hang down and those that, are not? He did mention that amber lights would take about 2.5 times roughly the number of light poles. And as you recall in their plan, there was like 6 extra poles, and that would have cost us a few grand. Well, another 200 plus 300 almost posts would have significant costs. And so where I'm going with this is, I think that we looked at the study, and everybody looked at it, and we're going to talk about comments today. I think what we owe the council is, what are the questions we would like to have them consider as they're going forward with a consultant to look at the options of amber lighting, a review of the current study, and I think if we can come up with that kind of list, we can get that to the town manager and help him formulate his contract. Thoughts? Go ahead, Mike.
There's over 400 and some electrical poles on the island. So I don't see, by adding lights, that they'd have to add hardly any poles down through the island. Right now, normally FPL, we go like every other pole or so, but if they had to, I think they ought to go with the LED amber, light. It's, very similar to the one they were going to put up, it's just this amber. And the bright light, will not attract the turtles. The ones they were going to put up would. But I'm just saying the amount of poles down through there will handle the added lights that they're going to have. And then the only other spot that I would see where they'd have to add poles is down where we took the overhead lines out from Times Square down. If they ended up putting, those same amber lights down through there, that, they would just put streetlight poles in there.
This is the first time I heard there's 400 poles on the island. Where'd that?
Over 400 poles. They said that yesterday in the meeting.
That's what the representative said?
I think there's 130 some that's in the light, it says it in the lighting
Yeah, I
report.
thought it was 187 plus some number, but,
On Estero, you mean?
Yeah,
yeah.
and there may be a total of 400 island-wide.
Island-wide, maybe, yeah, but I don't think on adding lights down Estero Boulevard, if you go down through there, you'll see there's plenty of poles with no lights on them. So I think that you could easily add the lights where needed. And if they did have to put a pole in, they're not going to put a feeder pole in, meaning one of the big ones. If they had to add a light, they would just put what we call a street light pole in there. It's pole. And then somebody brought up using the ones that were,
Oh, the mic, make sure it touches.
well, they just, right now, they were asking yesterday why the old poles are not removed, that are sitting next to the new poles. Well, that's because telephone and TV haven't gotten off them yet. We cut the poles down to where we can get them out of our way, and then we pull the poles that we can pull. But if telephone and TV are on them, we've got to leave the poles there until they transfer. And they take their sweet time. I talked to Roger about it after the meeting yesterday. I said, you got to get on them, because they'll just sit on them.
So to clarify, maybe I lost something. The council likes the lighting system, but they're concerned about the color of the light, the white light versus amber light?
As I interpreted yesterday, the public comment said the LED lights should be amber lights, not the ones that were in the recommendation.
The ones in the neighborhoods, though, are the white lights?
Yes.
And so they're saying that's too bright for Estero Boulevard? This is all turtle?
This was public comment.
Yeah, and this was all turtle concern
Yes.
only, or just?
Turtle concern, and then there was also something about health of the brighter lights, health impact on brighter lights. So what they did is they took public comment and the amber lights, and they said that basically the consultant said, we didn't look at that because part of his charge was to come in with a cost-effective solution that met all the standards for turtle protection, et cetera, and that's what they did. And one of the council members said that you didn't give us a number on amber lights. You didn't take that into consideration. He said the cost on that would be significantly higher in his opinion. I believe that's the term he used. And so he did what he was charged with by the county to come in with a solution that met the turtle compliance, that gave the 4-to-1, I think it was, ratio for lighting, that would minimize the eye confusion and improve the safety for pedestrians, traffic, and cyclists on the island. The council, after hearing public comment, said, we also want you to come up with, and a different firm, come up with what is the cost, what is the impact of amber lighting. So what I'd like the committee to do is come up with what are the questions that this new study should reveal or contain, so that we don't finish that study and then have to do a third study to compare the two studies to find out, is amber light versus the light that with the LED that was being proposed in the first one. I would like to make sure that since we had no input into the first, well, we might have, I shouldn't say no input, that the first study was based on cost efficiencies and safety with compliance to the turtle lighting, that the second study, when it comes back, can be compared to the first study. That's what I'd like us to come up with, so that we don't end up with a third study and we'll be long gone before any light changes take place. So with that, I'll throw it back out and ask, what are things that they should be looking at in the second study? So obviously one of them is the existing poles, the usage of existing poles, how many additional poles, and the cost of those would be one of the questions I think is the one that Roger was basically charged with. Another one that, for mine, just to keep the thought flow going here, is what is there a significant difference in turtle disorientation between the lights that were proposed with the cant and everything that was in the first study versus the amber lighting with the poles. Do we have the right of way to put them in? Quick math on that, that's like a 6 miles going that way. And if we put 500 poles in, it's like a pole every 63 feet. We would have some kind of pole, whether it's a street pole or a different type of pole. So if we can give it a couple seconds or minutes, and just as we're going through, what are the things that we would like the second study to be able to evaluate so that when they come back, they have 2 studies that align and they can make an informed decision? Make sense, Ron? So with that, let's have some questions for them, if any. Yep.
My first question would be the effectiveness of amber light versus clear light, I guess I would call it, in the safety aspect of being able to see pedestrians and bicyclists as you're moving down the road. Does the amber light provide a better lighting scenario for the mind's eye to see the pedestrians, or does the clear light provide a better atmosphere to see the pedestrian?
Can I just add to that, you know, the scientific study of that, there's a lot, yeah, I'm not trying to take on the turtles here. I just want to make sure that what we do is at the end of this, we come out with something that they can act on, whatever way they choose to act. That's, right. They're elected, they make the decisions, but our job is to help them be informed when they're making a decision. So the only thing I'd like to add to that, if you don't mind, Jim, is that it's a scientific study. It's not people coming in and say, well, I went to Sanibel and it looks great. I mean,
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. What else? Mike, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I thought the council, I mean, the main thing I think we need to do is we need to commingle the two, you know, the turtles and the safety of people. I mean, and they don't want to turn out lights. I mean, they said that yesterday numerous
Right.
times. They want to stop with the turning off lights. I had one across the street from me, and believe me, it was black getting in my driveway. I live on Estero Boulevard. So I'm just saying it's terrible. But I don't think cost should be the factor that we decide on. I think the LED lights, you know, amber, I didn't even know that, you know, I mean, when we didn't have the LEDs so much when I was doing it, but LED ambers, I'm sure they're bright, but I don't know, they just have an amber look to them, not the white look.
And I don't know.
Yeah,
But
so, I mean, that's what we need to, maybe they need to hang a couple or give us a comparison.
The guy that did the study said that they can tilt the lights so that they won't affect the turtles.
And to think that
When he gave his presentation, am I right?
they shine up, yeah,
Yeah.
they did, and he talked
Okay.
about that yesterday, but they, you know, they still get the bright light and the turtles still go for it. So it's, I don't understand all the turtle stuff that but I'm saying the cost should not be a factor. We should, you know, maybe they can put up you know, just take one area where they could put up a couple white lights and then move down the street and put up a couple ambers to where we could actually see them.
Can I touch on that?
Yeah.
So as you all know, we're in the middle of a project from Lanikai to Times Square, a sidewalk project. The lights have been a part of this project from the get-go. The town owns the blue aesthetic lights. Back and forth with FPL. I'm not going to point fingers, but the LDO was never applied for the lights through the county. It's still not applied for to this day. So
LDO, say that again?
LDO, anytime you do any work within the county right away, you have to do it. You have to apply for an LDO.
Translated
Limited
to-
Development Order.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry. We love our acronyms. So the proposal prior to this going to council yesterday was to put 8 of the LED lights, as the study said, from Lanikai to Times Square, 2 of which would be in front of Crescent Beach Park. So what happened in the interim was both FPL and staff here felt that we need to, the ground, it's open. We have an open trench. Let's put some additional handholds in and accommodate for additional lights. So New proposal turned into the 8 LEDs, but putting 7 of these amber lights in front of Crescent Beach Park, because that would meet the same ratio as the LEDs. And then in season, to turn off the 2 LEDs overhead and turn on the 7 ones in front of Crescent Beach Park. There was some discussions regarding the height of the poles, which was a concern. But right now, because of what transpired and the direction that was given yesterday, we're kind of on a froze. So that would have been an opportune time to move forward with something like that. But right now, we have a project ongoing that we either have to pull the blue poles or fill in with concrete the sidewalk and come back to it at a later date. So yesterday was a big deal, needless to say. So
You said you would have 7 of the amber lights in front of Crescent
just in front of Crescent Beach Park, that's how many it would take.
and 2 of the clear lights.
Yes,
And during turtle season, you would turn off the clear lights and light the 7.
yes.
Does it require 7 lights to get the same amount of lighting that the 2 clear lights?
Yes,
And the new, you're talking about apples to apples in terms of LED amber versus LED
the same company, the
clear.
Cree.
Same company, same light fixture, different colored light.
So if that gives you
that
an
kind
idea.
of answers, I mean, that lends itself to the question I asked earlier. In order to achieve the same lighting level down Estero Boulevard, you almost have to have 3 times as many.
2.5, he said yesterday.
Yes,
That's a lot of light poles
Yep.
on Estero Boulevard.
so,
But again, our job is to come up with the questions and the options that they should consider as they're going forward to make informed decisions. Go ahead, Chelsea.
so I did speak with David after the meeting, and I don't think that original study is a total loss, because like the photometric analysis is something that can be used moving forward. I did reach out to FPL yesterday and see if that same company that did the original photometric with LED, they're the ones who do the amber lights, so if they could take that same photometric and figure out how many fixtures based on that ratio, we can get a total number of fixtures, which FPL can give a cost for. One thing FPL can't do is give us a cost for how many poles that we need are out there. If we know that there's 180 or 130 poles that are currently out there, and we need 500 fixtures, I mean, that's simple math, but we can get a roundabout number. So FPL is working on that. The photometric does take a little bit of time, but I've already been on the phone today with the MPO regarding this. So they're trying to help out as best they can. But CPWG has completed their contract with the MPO. So.
That study is photo what?
Photometric.
Metric.
Photometric analysis, yes. But that will take some time. And please.
I was going to, if we're doing a new study, and the old study took years, how long is the new study?
I couldn't tell you. I don't know right now. So we're
This is
24
discouraging.
hours into it, so.
Right.
But please remember that this study only considered from Times Square to Estrelita. It did not consider the north end of the island, which is town maintained and owned, so.
And the other thing that, for those that weren't on the committee, when we had our last joint meeting with the council, and we were talking about crosswalks and shelters, to a person, they said, number one, because we did talk a lot about the turtles, and they said to a person that people safety is our first priority. Turtles are important, and we'll do everything we can, but people safety was their top priority, and that was basically, where the original study cost and to ensure safety. What other kind of things do we want them to look at? We got time sensitive. We've got the efficiency or the effectiveness of amber versus the LED that's being proposed in there. they would agree with you, Mike, that the commingling of the turtles and people is what we want to do, and there will be no turning off any lights under this plan, although they said they could. I don't know why they brought that up. I am going to ask that, you know, they look at the 22 that showed up in the study as being impacted, and where the not false calls, disorientation took place, to see if those were in fact lights that needed to be replaced anyways.
So I do want to touch on that because I think there may be a little bit of misconception. As you all know, this study, or that study, had gone on for 4+ years, as long as I've been here, so over 5 years. After Hurricane Irma, FPL came out just to get light fixtures up and running again, installed lights. And some of those we know to be, they were the incorrect light fixtures, which had that visible source of light, the globe almost. And within the last year, they did swap those out. So that may be where that 22 came in. It may not be all of them, I'm not sure. I do know that there was a concentration of them at the south end of the island, but those have been addressed, and Turtle Time can, I mean, they can confirm that, but.
Okay.
I had a question. Is there any way that they can just change the light bulb in those 22 during turtle season to the amber bulb?
I asked the same question, and they told me no. It is an entire different system. And
Different head.
the perfect example that was told to me was, if you have this tall pole and you go from LED to amber, it's like hanging a flashlight way up in the sky expecting it to illuminate, because it doesn't have as much output as the LEDs.
And the last thing on the recommendations we'll send to Roger is there a way to do a study, sampling of LED effectiveness versus the ones in the proposed lighting study? Anything else? All right, so we'll write that up. I'll get it to Chelsea, and Chelsea will get that to the town manager. Next up on is we have public comment, and so, yep, come on up.
Yes,
Yeah,
please.
it needs to be recorded, thank you.
And please identify yourself.
Hello, my name is Lowell Jager. I'm a 6-month resident here on the island, 6 months in Minnesota. We left last April, well, May, and part of the Estero Boulevard wasn't completed. When we got back, part of it was. And but my concern here today is I'm going to talk to you about the bike safety and the way the lanes are laid out now on that part of Estero. And I'll give you a little background. First of all, I'm a bike accident victim at 11 years old. Car hit me at 55 miles an hour and just sideswiped me, but I'm alive and well, but I was pretty banged up. In my job in the DNR, in the Minnesota DNR, I was a state park manager for many years, and 27 some years. In my last remaining years, I was a state recreation specialist on trails, trail development specialist, and a trail supervisor. And so I dealt with many, many cities putting bike lanes, bike trails, safety issues. I dealt with Minnesota Department of Transportation, where to put bike trails, where not to put them, how to design them, how to put them in lanes and everything else. And we spent millions of dollars and built many, many miles of trails while I was at Brainerd, Minnesota. Maybe you've heard of it, the Paul Bunyan Trail, one of the longest paved trail segments of bike trail in the nation. I was part of that and working with communities. So anyway, I bring to you now some concerns I have about the way the bike trail, and I have visited with a little bit with the Seller Molar people. I brought this to the attention of our commissioner, the new county commissioner. I didn't talk to him specifically, and a couple of people here in your office here. And here's my little spiel. Okay, I was a bike commuter for many years, and I learned right away, like most motorcyclists and bicyclists and pedestrians learn, there's 2 rules of the road. If you remember these, you stay alive. If you don't, you die. 1, they don't see you. 2, they don't care. If you remember those two rules, you'll stay alive. If you don't, beware. So when I'm looking at the project here, first of all, you have narrow lanes. And if you look from the, like say, this facility north, along there where the lanes are real narrow, just look at the rubber on the curbs. How many people are bouncing off those curbs? And so that's my first concern. Along with that, and I talked to somebody about in the county, and they are working on it, the manhole covers and the water main covers. What happens is that people are driving on this narrow road, and they're jogging around these manhole and water main covers because they're bumps or dips, and they're swerving, and they're going to hit pedestrians, bikes, and other vehicles. And they said they're addressing that. Now, the new sections have just opened there. Most of those are just perfect, but it's an issue of the narrowness. So you have in the north end, you have this nice wide sidewalk, and you have very narrow roads, so people are hitting those curbs all the time. And then you have my proposal would be something like this: move that yellow line in the middle over one notch so that it's on the brick rather than on the tar, and give the people some driving room. Well, that's just that north end. Now the south end, the new lane has been, bike lane, has been painted along the sides of the roads. And if you've seen that, it goes along the edges of the curb and goes around with the bus on the outside of the bus. And the other day, some friends of ours were riding, staying in the bike lane. They went out around the bus, and a car just about took them out, killed them, would have, because they were going to be pinched between the bus and the traffic lane. And so what's happening now is what you've done is, I'm going to explain this a little bit more, but what you've done is you've put these bicyclists in a very dangerous situation. One, on the road itself, you have a sharp curb that they cannot escape out of. Then you have this bus lane, and you have this lane going around the buses, and they can't get out of that situation either. So before I left the DNR, Minnesota Department of Transportation had this huge traffic safety study. And they asked me to be part of it because I was putting in so many bike trails. And they came up with a whole bunch of recommendations. I'll just give you some examples. They put rumble strips down the middle of the highways. And they put rumble strips in the widened shoulders. They took the white line on the right-hand side of a lane, and they moved it onto the shoulder to widen the travel lane, put the rumble strips over in the actual shoulder lane. They came up with flashing lights at intersections, approaching traffic, four-way stops instead of the two-way stop with a through road, because there were so many accidents happening, and all these things were happening. And then they came up with some recommendations for bike trails on well-traveled roads and stuff. And number one was never put a bike lane on a traveled traffic lane. That was our number one rule. If at all possible, don't do it. I'll give you an example. One city had...
Let me just, for 1 second, because normally it's like a 3-minute thing that people are allowed to speak during public comment.
Right.
But, so I didn't let you know that before that.
Is this okay?
Yeah, it's okay to speak, but we do have a time limit on it. So how about we'll wrap it up,
I'll
3
wrap
to
it
5
up real
minutes?
quick. I'll just tell you, this one city I'll just give an example. They painted these bike lanes right off, parallel parking. People are opening the doors. Bikes are running into the doors, going around the doors, and getting hit by traffic. And that's really what's happening here. So what I'm saying to you is that now the middle road, where the stone is your rumble strip to the middle, and your curb is the outside lane. And now today, we don't have just drivers. We have drivers that are alcohol, marijuana, texting, and they're not watching what they're doing. And what I'm saying to you is that in this situation with that painted lane and no escape for the biker to the right because of the high curb, or no escape when they go around a bus, you have them in a very dangerous situation. So my recommendation is, if you look as you come south from that big curve at the RV park, they took out the widened sidewalk and put in grass strips now between the curb and the sidewalk. This is just something I'm recommending also. Get rid of the grass, make the sidewalk nice and wide, get your bike lane up off of that traffic lane, and put the bikes back up on the sidewalk. Most bikers are not professionals. They just rent a bike at the local shop. They don't have lights, they don't have vests, most of them are driving down the wrong way of the road, if you look at them. And so my concern is that with the way the bike lanes are laid out, that we're gonna have some injuries. And we have killed people here on Bonita Beach Road last year. And so I think it's a serious concern. I'm bringing it to you because I did deal with these bike safety issues in my former career. And I would have never recommended bike lanes on that narrow of a road or lane. All right.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
And I would like to just make sure that that's brought forward for discussion and of the other committees.
I'm not sure of the committees, but what we'll do is we'll summarize what you said. It'll go in the minutes. We'll let it's the county road, the county design. And
Understood,
so
yes.
we'll pass those on. They have joint meetings with them, just expressing that. Other people have had similar concerns, but quite frankly, there's limited input from, I shouldn't say that. At this point, their engineers have constructed it this way. We'll put this down as they're looking at how they're going to change the landscape and stuff in that area. Sure. But we'll
And
raise
then
it.
I just have to have a comment about the lighting. You cannot put turtles over pedestrians and bicyclists. You absolutely cannot do it. They have to have a safe lighting. And if we lose one person over one turtle, I guess that would be a real travesty. So we have to have bright lighting for our pedestrians and our bicyclists. And I appreciate your time, I really do.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right, so now we got member items. Mike? Thank you. Yes, thank you.
I'm good.
Jim?
Yes, I had a question. Since we are the Public Safety Committee, does at any time, do we get a monthly report from the Sheriff's Office and the Fire Department regarding the level of activity that is occurring on the island so that we would have some concept of the level of crime activity and number of calls that are occurring, what kind of calls they are, from both services? Well, there's really three. There's the medics, but it seems to me it would be reasonable for someone in the town to be at least being informed of what is happening on our island. And then if an issue comes up, we would be in a better position maybe to talk to council about it, rather than having a panic situation where council calls the captain in and says, what's going on? We would already know. We could provide them with periodic updates or at least, be the council's representative to listen to the report and maybe decipher it a little bit and know what's going on here. Because I have no idea how many calls for service we have, where they are, how serious they are. I have no idea how many fire calls occur on this island and how many medic calls occur on this island. I thought maybe it would be helpful for the committee to have that kind of reporting.
Do you know what the fire does, Ron? Ron is a fire commissioner, that's what I'm asking.
I mean, that information is on the fire department's website. I mean, in years past, we had representatives from fire and police and county present, but our focus has changed. I agree with you, though. I think we should have that information without, I mean, fire would be no problem. I can make it so that I receive it and I can hand it to us. Police, that's a whole nother matter.
Do you know, Chelsea, what we get from the sheriffs?
We don't. We
Okay.
don't. I don't.
I'll raise it with the manager. We'll put it on a thing, raise it with the manager. Well, one of the things Ron did say, though, is important for both you and Mike. When the public safety reformed, it was primarily tasked with bike pedestrian safety, the bicycle study, the lighting study, and that. So in the last year and a half that we've been here, we've primarily focused on that. One member wanted to find out about some murder that took place, and that was his whole agenda for the year. That really wasn't our focus, but I will bring it up with the manager about what kind of reports, can we get those? I know the audit committee, we get monthly reports on the status of the budget. This would be very similar.
I will, I just lost my train of thought. What were we talking about? Lights?
Sheriff
Oh.
and fire.
For the newer members, I'm sorry, I will, when all of the committees redid their, mantra, their goal, their intent, and that was updated via ordinance or resolution, one of the two. But it kind of tells what this committee is about and what it does. I will be sure to get it to the new committee members, because I think that would be beneficial.
Along those lines, us being called the Public Safety Committee, that's not what we do. Public safety is police and fire, not turtles, which, turtles are important. But I think a name change for us, I mean, we're more of a traffic safety, not really, I mean, public safety is, when you think of it, it's police and fire, not traffic engineers and lighting specialists. And that's what we're trying to do. Or just leave it the way it is.
I kind of think, and I'm the new guy, so you have to take that for what it's worth. I kind of think that all of those things really roll into public safety. And having a broad explanation of it, or title, so to speak, allows us to take on projects on behalf of council that they think would be appropriate for us to maybe look at. But I'd also think it wouldn't hurt for someone in this town to know what's going on, but just for what it's worth.
Yeah, a part of the charter for the committees is that the council can ask us to take on anything that falls within the parameters. So your comment about broadly defining the naming of it would kind of lean to that. But, so as we'll send a note to Roger, and Chelsea's the liaison, about getting those, and maybe after we look at those for a few months, we'll decide, yeah, there's really nothing that we can impact, or maybe here are some things we can do. So it's not bad to look at them for at least 6 months and see what kind of information comes in there and see if there's anything that comes out of that analysis. Okay, anything else?
I do.
Heidi?
I went to the Times Square, Bayside Park, and the Bay Oaks parcel, and Ron was there also. And they gave us a sheet to hand in of our recommendations. Did anybody watch the video? No? All right, well then you all won't have any more recommendations to add to my sheet.
So how's this associated with this handout we got today, the branding comments?
All right, well, can I go full in depth into it, or do you want to continue the member items?
No, this is a member item.
Okay, so as Heidi said, we did have the meeting last Wednesday in the morning from 9 to 11 with the Times Square merchants and public safety and LPA. Great day all around. We got a lot of feedback from all the other committees as well. What I would like to do is maybe not necessarily this meeting. I don't know if you all are going to choose to have your typical meeting in November, but to get a consensus, I can email the, it wasn't really like a PowerPoint, but I can email the drawings that were sent out if you haven't already seen them. And you all can provide feedback for really all 3 parcels. But I think Times Square would have the most comments from you all, maybe even Bayfront Park. But if we can get a consensus from the committee, if it's, and it can be general. Right now we're at the conceptual stage, we're at 10,000 feet up. This is kind of the ideas. With the concepts going to council in March for approval, with the new council. Once those conceptuals are approved, we'll move into phase 2, which is actual design work, biddable, permitted documents. But I will send out what was passed out, or whatever, the semi-presentation to you all for your typical next meeting. And then if we can get some consensus from the committee, if it's we want more lighting, we don't want coconut palms, broader thinking, that would help the design team. Yes, that was part of it.
So you have a presentation then you can
It's-
send us?
It's a semi-presentation. It was a lot of showing the hand drawings.
I don't know how useful it'd be, because a lot of it didn't.
What about a link to the video? It's an hour, 2 hours?
Yeah, I can send out that.
Why don't you send the link and send the paper anyways, and
Okay.
we'll take a look at it?
Yep.
Okay. Coconut palms. Also, you'll send us a link to that video for those that want to
Yes.
look at that. What else you got, Heidi?
Heidi.
Oh, I thought you had more.
I do have the one,
Oh.
but I'll wait my turn.
No, no. Part
No,
of the
I've
branding?
gotten, well, yes.
It's part of branding? Then-
Kind of.
Then if it's part of branding, keep going. If it's brand new and unique,
Keep
it's your
going.
turn.
So, the brand, each liaisoner, I think Tom, did you go to the meeting, or Tom went? Tom went to the, branding meeting. The comments, are here. I have yet to find out what the next steps are with them, but I know that they sat down with a committee liaison from almost every advisory committee, and then they sat down with each council member, except for Ray Murphy. But I know that they're compiling, and I will come back with an update for next steps at your next meeting.
Did everybody get back to you on the comments? I mean, because
Pretty-
Chelsea had sent out a thing
I think that
last month, so
that
that's
was the
good.
most comments I think I've gotten for anything.
Good, thank you.
so,
Well, it's a different committee.
Yeah.
All right. That's done with branding, right? Let's go back to Heidi.
I think that was, that's all
Okay.
I had, yeah.
Ron?
I don't have anything.
I got a couple things then. So I had received this morning from Councilmember Butcher a link to a study that was done on bus shelters in general. And I asked Chelsea to send that to all of you. There's a PDF in there that goes in quite a bit of detail about the value of shelters, the value of comfort at shelters, et cetera. But one thing I had on it before I got that from Bruce is, what is the latest on the shelters? What's the status? And there's really a few things on there. One was, has anybody talked to the county, and what was their reaction to our top 10, and did that get funded in the add-ons?
So Roger, I believe, reached out to the county to try to open discussions with them. I don't know that he's heard anything back from them. In the meantime, we did meet with Lamar Advertising. I actually just sent them an email 2 days ago following up if, I didn't know if we scared them away. But I'm still waiting to hear back from them. But there was funding, I believe on the add-on list for engineering and production of bus shelters. I know in discussions with Lamar, they said that it's a timely process. Our goal was to hopefully get a pilot project shelter in before season, but considering I haven't even gotten an email back from them, I don't know where that stands.
And Lamar would be to do the construction of a shelter?
Of a shelter that has digital advertising, whereas the county's contract with Brasco did not provide digital advertising. And that, I know that was a key point for you all, so.
It's digital advertising as well as safety message, current events, et cetera, et
Yes,
cetera.
correct.
There is another firm, it's SOOFA. Check them out. They're SOOFA.com. You'll find it. What's unique about them is they're standalone digital. They're meant to be put in neighborhoods, and so we could put them right next to, the smaller truck stops as well. So if we have the 10 nice ones where people can sit and get the fixed messages, we could also at the smaller ones put things like next bus is arriving, et cetera, where we have limited ROI right away.
Yep.
The other thing on the shelter, do we have the specifics yet? Do we ever meet with the sheriff and get a definitive list from the sheriff and fire?
No. We got some feedback from fire, I believe, Ron
Martin?
stopped by to one of the meetings. And I believe the chief did give some comments and ideas for like CPRs, typical things that we could put on these, but have not heard anything back from sheriffs. So that's, and I think Roger meets with him maybe once a month or so, I'll put it.
All right, add that, because we need to get that part of the design as well as that two-way communication is the critical piece. I know that, the chief talked about putting in, the CPR things like that, but the real thing for the safety in the neighborhood, the safety of the people that are in there, the health aspect of it is the communication with some sort of emergency management services or sheriff, that if someone is in distress, that they have a way to do that, and that the cameras were there for the safety of the people as well as to limit the number of homeless, et cetera, et cetera. So see where Roger says in that, and maybe you and I have to get together and push somewhere, because it's great that we construct the shelters. I know we have conduit at all those places to add this stuff, but we really need to get that locked down.
Yep.
So the digital advertising and the other. All right, so that'll be a follow-up with, you'll check with Roger, and then I'll check with you.
Yep. Thanks, keeping me in line.
I'm going to stay on top of that, digital. And the other thing that I had as a follow-up was the sidewalk on Bay and School. I know yesterday they discussed that. Are they going with their recommendation of moving the tram stop to the library side and kind of redoing that? That's great.
Well, I say that, but I think the ink is still drying from where we executed the STA. So, but that, when I began discussions with that engineering firm, I did tell them this is, the sides that we wanted it and what we intended on doing. So that'll come as we progress with plans and design. Of course, you all will see it, just like the downtown plans.
But the point is the council went along with,
Yes.
the idea was to move the tram stop from the back of Sea Grape, right there on the side where people had their plastic chairs, to across the street at the library and put a true shelter in there, and reroute the tram up School, front of whatever that street is, and back down Bay, as opposed to the route they were going.
Which, that would be an opportune time to do a pilot program for a bus shelter.
Yes, that'd be perfect, because that'd be a great spot for it, because that will be, that does get heavily trafficked right there.
Especially during season.
The only other thing that I had, well, two things, but they both relate to crosswalks, crosswalks placement. We gave that list to them. We saw the 60% or 30% plans for the south end. I see they occasionally dig up and put new crosswalks in other places. But just an update on that, where the county is on our crosswalks. But the other thing that came up at yesterday's meeting, and it's come up a few times, is the lighting at crosswalks. It's my understanding, and so this is different than what the assumption I've been going on is, when we met with the county, they made it clear that the first priority, the first, as you sequence the lighting in the crosswalk, was to agree on what the street lighting was, because then the crosswalk lighting has to be balanced with the street lighting, so that you didn't get eye confusion. We couldn't just go in and say, we're going to put the dual hangers in the middle of the road on each of these, that it really depended on where those posts go, where the street lighting goes. If that understanding is correct, then we just need to make sure that the people that keep asking about that understand there is a sequencing into building the lighting. Does that make sense, Mike? So let me try another way. So when the county was in, we had looked at the crosswalks and talked about lighting at crosswalks themselves. And what was agreed in concept was, at crosswalks, they would put lights that overhung the crosswalk to light the crosswalk from both sides. So regardless of which side, you'd see the person waiting, and you'd see them when they're in the crosswalk itself. And what we were told at that time is they agree with that concept, but specific lighting for specific crosswalks would have to be determined after we have designed the overall street lighting, street pole lighting, to go down, so that we didn't get eye confusion, that we didn't get blind spots because there was too much light, et cetera, et cetera.
If they put, at the crossings, do you know if they put in pipe underneath the road?
They've installed additional conduit for future anything the
Okay.
county has, yes.
It was the agreements there to put them in. but the timing of design is predicated on the design of the street lighting, is my understanding, if that's correct? Just so that they know that, because this comes up every time. And if they understand that there is a sequencing, that you get the street lighting, and then based on the street lighting, the placement of that street lighting, then you look at the individual ones to determine whether it's one going across from one side or the other, both can go across, or if that particular one, because of all the lighting there, you know, it wouldn't, I can't imagine whether it would need it, but that's it. Okay, I just want to make sure that that stops coming up every time. It's just confusing the issue.
I have one thing on that. I may be wrong, but I think Bruce, at our lighting, when the guy gave our lighting study presentation, I think he asked something about that, and the guy said with that proposal, we would not need additional lights. It would light up the crosswalks enough.
And I think he's wrong, but that's.
I mean, I'm just saying that I think
Yeah.
that's,
Well, only because those go down the one side of the street, and what we were talking about is being able to illuminate people waiting to cross the street as well. But that, again, is part of the, I don't doubt he said it, but I think that, again, is part of the design of the overall lighting, but the sequencing is what we need to really look at. Mike, you were going to say something on that?
I was just going to say I think any critical crosswalk should have the amber yellow lights that are like down at the old Holiday Inn or farther down. I mean, any one, like we need one right there at the curve at Sterling and Estero. I mean, there's a big neighborhood there, and they all funnel to that one crosswalk. And we've had numerous accidents there coming around that corner. But I think, all the critical ones need to have, the flashing lights and stuff when people are crossing. I mean, that's the thing that's going to
Yes,
slow you down.
so there's, again, it goes to the street lighting, the crosswalk lighting, and then the crosswalk signage, which would include, in some case, the RRFBs or whatever those things are. Those, but what my understanding is from what the county, and it doesn't matter because what the county says they're doing is we determine the street lighting, then we look at each crosswalk individually for specific lighting at the crosswalk and the signage for the crosswalk, which really is not dependent on, but factors in the amount of traffic. So I live, well, there's not a crosswalk near me, but if there was one close near me, it's houses. And so there's no one place like they do coming out from around the laundry there and crossing there. That would be one that would be more than likely the high-density one that would have the flashing light signage with it. It would have whatever street lighting and crosswalk lighting. But those are things that we'll come back to. We've been waiting on the lighting study that we'll be waiting on. All right, anything else? Anybody got anything else?
I do.
Oh, Chelsea does.
Sorry. So, when David came to this committee and gave the presentation, he mentioned that someone at the county had questioned who's paying for the lighting. We did a little bit of research, and the town is paying for the lights, for the street lights of Estero Boulevard and all of the side streets. So I just wanted to clarify that point.
More detail? What do you mean, who's paying for the lighting?
The FPL bill that we get every month,
Oh, okay.
the town is paying for that.
Why would that be?
Couldn't tell you.
I mean, it's a
I-
county
I-
865 state road. Why would the beach be paying that?
because there was something in the meeting, technically, Estero Boulevard does not have to have any streetlights. They're not recommended. There's something with
What
that.
David explained in the presentation, both here and at the council, is that there's no requirement for, that the town or the county must install streetlights. So I don't know how we got to where we are today, but that question, I believe, was posed yesterday at the council meeting as well. I did ask the clerk's office to do some digging and see if there's an interlocal or any type of agreement. We came up empty-handed. I did ask the MPO to see if any other incorporated areas, if they were in the same boat as we are. But again, we take direction from town council. So we're working on the pricing of the amber lights and things of that nature. So as I progress with that, I will, of course, relay whatever information I have to you all. So
At some point, there's got to be some language somewhere. We didn't just, maybe when they incorporated the town, it might have even gone back as far as that, but somewhere there has to be, Florida Power and Light has to know why we're paying them. I mean, there has to be some reason they're sending us the bill and not the county. That was, the lighting
As
was
long as
there
the
before
bill's-
we were a town, so someplace there was a transition in the billing process.
As long as the bill's being paid, I'm sure.
Well, but I mean, that's how we would
Yeah.
find out how that transition took
Yep.
place, and it may be that long ago.
Yep.
All right,
so-
thank you.
So I met with some of the property owners of the downtown area that would be impacted by the downtown sidewalks. Most of them were okay. They just had a couple odd and end comments.
Which downtown sidewalks?
The ones on Crescent, First, Second, Third, and Fifth.
Okay.
I had one property owner that was really concerned, and the closeness of the sidewalk to their property. Roger did bring that up at town manager's items. I think it might have been 2 meetings ago. And council gave direction to continue designing as is, with sidewalks on both sides of the streets, and keep chugging along. So I did speak to the engineer. We're hoping to get to 90% here, maybe first or second week of December. And then it's a small jump to 100%, which would be biddable documents. So that is moving along quite well. Also, we mentioned earlier the Bay Oaks School Street, that design was approved. They will begin they got the signed STA and the PO, so they should be moving along quite quickly, because there's not really much blocking it other than the library's driveways. So as that progresses, again, I will keep you apprised. So sidewalks on School and Bay, council just approved yesterday. It would be on the library side of both. That would connect you from Estero to the school in that block. And then that's what was discussed earlier with the turnaround. Instead of going counterclockwise, go clockwise with the tram during season. So, but that should be underway here shortly. I do have one housekeeping item. As you know, council requests meeting updates, advisory committees, items, and reports. A more formal way of doing things is to provide an actual written report that gets posted and published on the agenda. Our date is scheduled for April 6th of 2020. That is also the same meeting date that the new council is brought in, sworn in, inauguration. So I just wanted to put that out there that we will have to provide some form of written update, as we've done in the past, is take a consensus here. John collects it, collates it, and then sends it to me, proof it, and then send it on to the town clerk. So I think other than housekeeping items, and if you want to have meetings in November and December, that's for the committee to decide. But I will be here with bells and whistles.
Well, alfalfa, or what's the bells and whistles? All right.
Come in
so
December and you'll see.
we have some updates. We'll be getting on the shelters, updates on what they do with the lighting study, et cetera. But I don't know from here if there's anything at this point that we need to vote on or make recommendations on this month. Does anybody see a need for another meeting this month, or should we look for the first part of December, and we'll go with whatever comes out from the council before that, whatever comes out from the town between now and then. We'll how about the week, Chelsea, you and I just get together that week just before Thanksgiving, the beginning of Thanksgiving week, that Monday or Tuesday. We'll go through what's open, and we'll determine if we need a meeting, then we'll put together an agenda and call it for December. If there's nothing, because the council is, trying to close stuff off too, if they're not doing anything, there's not a lot we can do. In the
Council
interim.
only has one meeting in December, and that's on December 2nd. So
They're not gonna need a lot from us in December then. All right, so let's leave it that way. Chelsea, you and I will get together that Monday or Tuesday, be the last before Thanksgiving, and then We'll see what agenda items have come up based on the work that Roger's doing with a new consultant. Anything that comes out of branding, anything that comes out of the meeting in the shelters, Lamar, et cetera. And if we have actionable items, then we'll meet that week or try and get in there so we can get some information to the council. So let's talk about it the week before that. This way we could look at trying to get in some meeting before the council does. If we actually have any, I doubt there's anything to progress that quickly, but if it does, we'll look at that.
Everyone's available, the typical date that it's scheduled for the month of December. I think what are we,
We haven't had a typical date.
November.
You're talking late November.
Talking, yeah.
You're talking like the 19th, right?
the 19th is when we typically meet, so that's,
Which, if, well, keep it open, but that would be after the council, and there'd be no action the council would take, so we'd have to look at what their January thing is. So let's do it this way. You and I will get together, 2 weeks from now, and see what kind of progress is made. Because,
2 weeks from now would be our regular meeting.
yeah, we're not doing that no more in November.
Okay. But then you have Thanksgiving.
Yep.
And
So
then
then-
council meets on the 2nd, so our meeting would be after theirs.
so the meeting would be December 17th for you all, if you opted to cancel your November meeting.
Monday.
Well, if something would come up, I mean.
If there's
we
something
could
that
have
we
a
really
meeting
need
on
to
the
do.
26th.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking, what Jim's saying. We'll meet the week before that,
I won't
see
be
what's
here.
going
I'll
on.
be here.
I'm on vacation.
Well,
You and I get together in 2 weeks and see what progress has been made. And based on what progress has been made on any of these things, if there's actions that we need to take, we'll figure out how to get people together to make recommendations, if the council's going to take any action at December 2nd meeting. If they're not, then we can meet later in December to make recommendations for the January meeting. Make sense?
sure.
So one more time. So you and I will talk in 2 weeks. We'll look at what's out there that we've put out today. We'll look at what the council is talking about on their December 2nd meeting. If there's activity that they need us to make a recommendation or hold a meeting and come up with some action on before that meeting, we'll meet. If there's not, then
You'll meet December.
if there's something to meet for in December. If not, it'll be January. We're kind of
Right.
predicated
That's
on
fine.
if progress has been made on any of these and what the council has on their agenda.
Yep, I have to have the agenda out the 10th of December if you meet the 7th.
We'll know by then, because we'll know what actions they take on December 2nd, which would drive the January meeting.
Yep.
Got it. Any motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Okay, we're out of here. Thank you, everybody. That was long.
Have a great Thanksgiving.
Yes, everybody.
So was the...